Hello and welcome back to the Darkest Dungeon Mod Spotlight. Today we will be taking a look at the Slayer, created by S Purple and an actual bird IRL. The Slayer is a brutal doomed warrior hell-bent on the destruction of the horrors that surround the hamlet. Wielding a demon-bound shotgun and donning Eldritch Corrupted plate mail, the Slayer uses the monster's powers against them in the unending crusade to release the manor from the grip of darkness. The Slayer is a bulky damage dealer who functions well in a shuffling party, but mostly wants to stay closer towards the front line. And if you couldn't tell from the promotional art, the Slayer is inspired by the Doom guy from the classic games Doom, Doom 2 Hell on Earth, and Doom 2016. Now, in order to best understand how the Slayer functions, let's go through his stat line and see where his strengths lie. First of all, his health is quite above average. It's at max level, it's at 52 health, which is more than a Hellion and less than a Man-at-Arms to get an idea. He's not quite in the tank role, but he is very bulky, and most of the time you shouldn't be worried about him dying in one round. His other strengths, he has very high damage at an average of 15.5, which is higher than a lot of damage dealers. It's less than like the Leper, but it's still really good. And he has better accuracy than the Leper. His stun resistance is quite above average. His move resistance is also very good. His disease resistance, his debuff resistance are both a little above average. And his dodge, his crit, his blight and bleed resistances are all average. Even his trap disarming ability is at an acceptable amount. It's only 10% lower than, say, the Highwayman. So he can disarm traps just fine. His only weakness is a low speed. At max level, he has a speed of 4, which is below what you want it to be. I think a good speed would be like 6 speed or higher. But otherwise, his stat line is amazing. So that already puts him on a very strong footing. The only caveat to all of this is that even though his base damage is pretty high, all of his abilities have a damage penalty on them of various degrees. So he's not quite getting all of the mileage out of the damage that other heroes might be. But it does mean that any bonuses to damage he gets are going to be more effective. So the Slayer's first attack is Run and Gun. He can use it from positions 2 and 3 and attacks both the front 2 positions of the enemy team. This is much like the Leper's Hue or the Crusader's Zealous Accusation, except it has better accuracy, better damage, better crit, and it buffs one of his other abilities, Bound for Glory. So it's already a pretty solid ability. But getting into the details, its damage scales from minus 35% at rank 0 up to minus 15% damage at max rank. For an ability that hits 2 targets, that's pretty good. Most other attacks like that are minus 40, minus 50% damage. So it's already pretty good, and it has a positive crit modifier, which a lot of abilities have much lower crit, or even negative crit values. It also pushes the Slayer back one square, one space, one row. And, you know, he can work with a shuffling party that way if he wanted to help get a highwayman closer to the front to point blank shot or something. Or to dance around with a jester, anything like that. And it gives a 10% damage bonus to Bound for Glory, as I said, for lasting until the next time you camp. Now, what is Bound for Glory? It's this last skill, but we're going to save that for later. The Slayer's second attack is Reeling Reload. He can only use this from the back 2 positions and can attack any of the back 3 positions of the enemy team. It has a hefty minus 70% damage penalty on it, but it's primarily a tool to reposition the Slayer and to pull the enemy team. It moves the Slayer forward 2 spaces, and it pulls your target with a 100 to 140% chance of pulling them 3. So you can move yourself back with run and gun, and then reposition by using Reeling Reload to bring you back to the front, as well as pulling an enemy out of position. If you think you're going to be fighting enemies that you want to pull, maybe you'll start the Slayer in the back and lead the fight with Reeling Reload. Additionally, Reeling Reload gives Bound for Glory 5 accuracy until the next time you camp. The Slayer's next attack is Spike Sabbat. He can use it from the front 3 positions to attack the first or second position of the enemy team. It has a fairly low accuracy of 80. This isn't as low as the old leper, I guess, but it's like old Vestal accuracy. It's not great, but with some buffs, like you can hit reasonably often with it. It has a minus 70% damage modifier, so it's not primarily a damage dealing ability. But what it does do is it has a 100 to 140% chance of stunning the enemy, and 100 to 140% chance of pushing the enemy 1. Additionally, it buffs Bound for Glory 3% until the next time you camp. This is your control ability. You want to take a frontliner out of combat and maybe bring one of those backliners up. You can use Spike Sabbat to stun them and shuffle the party around. It's very useful in that. Slayer's next ability is Tag and Bag. You can use this from anywhere except the front position, and can use it against any position on the enemy team. It does no damage, but it marks the target for 3 rounds. Additionally, it debuffs the target for 12 to 28% damage amplification with a 110% chance. The weird thing is that 110% chance does not increase with rank, and I'm not sure if that's what the developers were intending, so I'm certainly going to bring it up with them and see if that's what they want or not. But I have not seen any ability that doesn't improve, you know, how much they bleed, or the chance to bleed or blight or debuff as you rank it up. So that certainly seems like a weird thing. Additionally, the skill, the Tag and Bag, buffs Bound for Glory by 5 accuracy until the next time you camp. Now, this is kind of interesting because even though he has an ability to mark targets, none of his abilities benefit from it. He doesn't benefit from the mark at all. So obviously he still benefits from the damage amplification and the Bound for Glory buff, but if you want to make use of the mark, you're going to need one or two other heroes in the party that can get extra damage out of that mark. The Slayer's next attack is Biting Blade. You can use this from positions 1, 2, or 3 to attack positions 1 or 2 on the enemy team. It has a small damage penalty of -15%. Additionally, it has a 100 to 140% chance of 10 to 20% protection shred, and it buffs Bound for Glory by 10% until the next time you camp. This is a pretty standard attack for the Slayer. He can use it without being shuffled around like Run and Gun or Reeling Reload, and it has one of the higher damage modifiers for the Slayer. Run and Gun starts off lower, but once you get to max rank, it's going to have that same -15% damage mod, and it hits 2 people, so that'll get better, but it'll still push you back, and eventually you have to find some way to get him forward again, whether that's Reeling Reload or someone else moves back in the party to get him in position. Biting Blade is just a stable, stay here, cut them up with a chainsaw, and shred their protection. So if you're fighting a boss that has a little protection, maybe not the cannon, I think it has way too high debuff resistance, but certainly a number of regular enemies have 10 to 30% protection, and being able to cut that down a bit will help you squeeze in a little extra damage. Or even against like a pelagic grouper that gets 50 plus protection, being able to cut that down helps a lot. The Slayer's next attack is a fun one. This is Rip and Tear. He has to be in the front 2 positions to use it, and can only hit the front 2 positions of the enemy team. It has a 60% damage penalty, but it does actually have a pretty decent crit modifier. When you use it, it self-heals the Slayer for 4 to 10 points at max rank. After you reach rank 1 with the ability, it also gains a stress heal for 6 points at minimum rank, up to 14 points at max rank. 14 points of stress healing is an awful lot. Like, I don't know, Rip and Tear sounds like a really amazing ability to me. At max rank, healing you for 10 points and stress healing for 14, and doing a little damage in the same process. Like, I don't know, it sounds a little strong to me, but tell me what you think. Additionally, Rip and Tear buffs Bound for Glory by 3% until the next time you camp.
Hidden.
Now for the skill we've all been waiting for, Bound for Glory, otherwise known as BFG, also known as Big Fucking Gun, also known as basically Finale but good. This is your finishing move. He can use it from positions 1 or 2, and can target any position on the enemy team, making it very, very versatile. However, you might notice these stats kind of suck. It moves you back to when you use it, so when you use it, you're immediately out of position to use it again, unless for some reason you only have 1 or 2 heroes in your party. It has a pretty poor base accuracy at 70, though it does have some really weird accuracy scaling. The first time you rank it up, it goes from 70 to 85, gaining 15 accuracy with 1 skill up. And then after that, it just gains 5 accuracy a rank. Again, I'm going to bring this up with the developers and see if that's intentional. It has a damage penalty of minus 20% at min rank, eventually scaling up to a 0% penalty at max rank. You can only use it once per battle at level 0. After ranking it up twice, it gains another use, and then at max rank, you can use it 3 times per battle. Though it's a little intense to use 3 times a battle, as we'll get to. So when you use it, you have a 33% chance of dealing yourself 5 to 13 damage as you rank it up. Of course, in my experience, 33% chance basically means 100% chance. Like, it happened every single time. I mean, I know what the code says. I know it says 33% chance, but it happened every time. So just be ready for the possibility that you could take that damage. Additionally, when you use Bound for Glory, you debuff yourself to take 100% additional self-damage for 2 battles, including the one you're currently in. So you use Bound for Glory, you get that debuff. When the battle ends, that's going to tick down to 1 battle remaining, and then the next battle, you still have that debuff, and it wears off at the end of that battle. So it's pretty risky. Maybe you don't get the self-damage. Maybe you'll be fine. Or maybe you use Bound for Glory a couple times and hit yourself for 30 some odd damage. It's certainly risky, but considering this whole time you've been buffing it with all your other skills for increased damage, increased accuracy, increased crit, you can get some pretty serious damage modifiers. I had a damage modifier of more than plus 100%. I had like plus 30 accuracy and plus 20 crit or so, and it can do some serious damage. So you could, if you decide to put off camping for a while and just build up those buffs, you can do some serious damage to a boss, or even just against random enemies. Battle starts, Slayer gets his turn, boom, you delete an enemy. And then you can just resort to Rip and Tear to heal up, or whatever, and continue to buff up Bound for Glory. It's a pretty powerful ability, but not without its drawbacks. I really like the design of it. Now, let's quickly go through his camping skills. The first one is The Beast Sleeps for 3 time points. Reduce the Slayer stress by 20, and all other companions by 5 stress. It's a pretty okay de-stressing camping skill. If he has more stress, you can bring his stress down while topping everyone else off. Though once Rip and Tear has a stress heal attached to it, you're probably not going to need it as much. I think he can sustain his own stress pretty well, both through that and through crits on his abilities. Slay the Weak, which for 2 time points gives him a buff for 4 battles, where he gets 10% crit if the enemy is blighted, and 10% crit if they are bleeding. If they are both blighted and bleeding, he gets 20% crit. So if your team has people who can apply those statuses on them, blight or bleed, you can get more crits, more stress heal, and you know, it's okay. You can kind of build a strategy around having this camping skill and get a lot of benefit out of that. Incorruptible Resolve for 3 time points. The Slayer gets a buff for 25% stress resistance for 4 battles, and removes mortality debuffs from the Slayer. If he got a little low earlier on, went to Death's Door, got a lot of stress, maybe Incorruptible Resolve is just what you need to kind of get back into the game. Get rid of those debuffs, get some stress resistance, and try and get a handle on things. It's not something you're going to use frequently, but when you need it, you'll be glad you have it. And his last camping skill is It Smells Them. For 1 time point, the Slayer can ignore stealth for 4 battles. It's not always going to be handy, but it is a very cheap camping skill, and sometimes it could be really handy to just be able to ignore stealth and stun them, or pull them forward, or just blast them with Bound for Glory. You might be able to save yourself a little grief this way. Some other miscellaneous things I want to go over with the Slayer. He is non-religious, which, more than any other hero, I think that is very appropriate for the Slayer. This guy has been to hell and back. There is nothing religious about him. He benefits from the Training Ring District. Additionally, whenever he gets a crit, he gets a buff for 2 speed for the next round. Another weird thing I noticed when I was going through the code, it didn't look like any of his abilities have the is stall invalidating false tag. Now, for those who don't really look into the code, what this means is if you're in a battle and 2 of your characters, if there are 2 or less enemies remaining, and you use at least 2 abilities that don't invalidate stall, then the stall counter is going to advance, and you're going to start gaining stress, and then eventually reinforcements. So the fact that none of them have this tag on them means that all of his skills invalidate stalling. So you could say use Tag and Bag to not do any damage to the enemy, but you're not going to get those stall penalties. And I do think that Tag and Bag should have that marker. All the other abilities do damage, so that's okay. They don't need them, but Tag and Bag really should, and I'm definitely going to bring that up with the developers. Now, I don't normally do this, but I thought some of these trinkets were pretty cool, so I wanted to go over them really quickly. For his common trinkets, he has the Field Dressing, which boosts the healing received and the stress healed. It's just a good way to keep yourself healthy. The Sin Eater's Leer gives you 8 untyped accuracy and 2% crit. For a common trinket, this is pretty good. 8 accuracy is nothing to laugh about. At uncommon, he has Earthcracker Shells, which gives you 20% damage to run and gun, but minus 12 accuracy. Seems like a pretty fair trade-off. 20% damage is pretty significant since it hits 2 enemies, but the accuracy penalty is something you're going to have to be aware of. Make sure to debuff the enemy's dodge, or give him another trinket that gives him that accuracy back, like a focus ring. The Hardened Bone Spike gives you 20% stun and move skill chance. So obviously this goes very well with his spiked Abbott attack to stun and move enemies. But it also works with reeling and reload to pull an enemy forward and get that extra chance of success. At the rare level, he has Razorbone Eviscerator, 30% debuff skill chance, and 8% crit versus size 2 and larger. This is a good way to get Bag and Tag to debuff enemies. And 8% crit against large enemies seems like a great way to take out bosses or any of the size 2 enemies. It's a decent trinket. I don't know how much I'd use it, but if Bag and Tag is going to have that flat 110% debuff chance, getting that 30% debuff skill chance bonus on top of crit seems like a fair trade-off. Or more like a fair bonus, not a trade-off. It's all positive. Then there's the Slayer's Mark. It is rare for minus 15% damage dealt, but you get 10% crit and you heal for more stress. This is kind of interesting. Now, in general, that extra 10% crit isn't going to make up for the 15% damage loss, but getting more crits means his stress is going to be lower, your ally's stress is going to be lower, and I mean you're going to do some spikes of damage. Plus, having a higher crit means that if you have damage bonuses from other sources, they're going to benefit from that increased crit, and they're basically being amplified by that 10% crit. So it's something to keep in mind if you have ways to buff up his damage, whether it's with the Crimson Curse, or a damage trinket, or even his own damage amplification on the target. And at the very rare level, he has Bloodthirsty Periapt, otherwise known as the Berserk power-up. It gives 25% melee damage at the penalty of minus 35% range damage. So if you're going to use this, just keep him in the front positions and stick to Rip and Tear and the other ability, the Chainsaw, and you'll get a lot of mileage out of that. In fact, you could combine it with Slayer's Mark and just chainsaw the hell out of people. You take advantage of the melee damage and the 10% crit. Now, his Crimson Court trinkets are something to behold. The Fourfold Harm Charm, otherwise known as Quad Damage. It has a 100% bonus damage dealt, which is obviously incredible. No other trinket gives anywhere near as much. But it also gives you 100% damage received. So it's quite the gamble. You can really wreck some enemies with this, but you're gonna want to protect him or give him a protection charm or have the hardened skin work, just some way to help mitigate some of that damage. Or, go balls to the wall and just kill the enemy and hope you don't die. And his other Crimson Court trinket is Parasitic Gauntlet. It gives 15% protection and 15% death blow resistance, and 4 speed if your health is below 40%. Now, obviously these are a set and they seem to go very well together. Do a lot of extra damage, but you also get some protection and death blow resistance to help protect yourself from risk because of that double damage received. And if you have both of them, you get the set bonus for 25% increased healing if you're at low health, and 30% protection if you're at low health. So in this way, you can get low, use Rip and Tear to heal yourself back up using that healing bonus, and continue to deal tons of damage with the fourfold Harm Charm. I think it is a very flavorful set, very useful. I would certainly want to try to use it, but it doesn't seem overpowered. I'm not sure. I mean, I'd have to actually get it and try it out to be able to tell. 100% damage dealt is no joke. Maybe it's too good. I don't know. Tell me what you think, and especially if you've played the Slayer long enough to try these trinkets out yourself. Let me know what you think. In conclusion, the Slayer is a flavorful and powerful damage dealer. In my experience so far, the Slayer has been very effective, perhaps even overpowered, and certainly looking at how his abilities scale up, I think he may be too strong. He just has everything. High resists, high health, good damage, self-heal, self-stress heal, stuns, knockback, high mobility, powerful finishers, good trinkets. The only drawback is a mediocre speed, and to be honest, it's not that big of a deal. Give him the Crimson Curse and a quirk for bonus speed, and you're golden. Otherwise, I think the design of the class is wonderful. It really fits the theme of the Doom guy, and the overall concept behind his skills is coherent and interesting. I just think he's a bit too strong. But please, I am not the final arbiter on what is balanced. Try the Slayer out for yourself and tell me what you think in the comments below, and give feedback to the developers as well, as they do listen to us and want to make the class the best it can be. Playing the Slayer has reminded me of a saying: I'm not trapped in here with you, you're trapped in here with me!